Slowing down or random intimacy exercises won't fix vaginismus. So if sex is still hurting, it's not your fault. It's because slowing down misses the key piece, and that is around what actually turns you on. My name is Kanan Cassard. I'm a sex therapist. I'm a pelvic pain mental health coach, and I've also gone through vaginismus treatment myself. There are so many times that people have talked about slowing down, doing random intimacy exercises. What is really missed is the key ingredient of understanding what really turns you on beyond the things that we think should be turning us on. And that's what we're going to dive into this video. Well-meaning therapists, sex therapists, articles, they recommend slowing down, breathing, taking time, going on a date for overcoming painful sex and the challenges in intimacy, but that's just not quite grasping the whole picture. For many people, this actually makes them feel so much worse. And if you find yourself dealing with those same sort of challenges, I get it. So many times, either I have said this myself in my own experience, or my clients report this to me, that they're like, why am I still hurting? Why am I not aroused? I love my partner. I'm excited about my partner, but I just really can't fathom engaging in anything that makes me feel excited about sex, even when everything else is going well. Now, slowing down didn't work for me either. Date nights didn't work. And it was because I didn't understand what my body actually needed. I didn't know that I needed to bring a little bit more clarity into understanding what my authentic arousal needed, especially after having gone through a pelvic pain treatment. I needed a way to figure out how to take shame and pressure and expectation that my arousal system should look a certain way. That needed to come out of the picture. And that's what helps my clients too, is when they start to remove that pressure expectation that sexual arousal should be all of these things within this box. For people who are overcoming painful sex, who have had traumatic experiences in the past, or who just get turned on and aroused in different ways, those people, you, us, me, we need a better system and framework for understanding how authentic arousal actually works. Because many people don't need actually slower sex, but what they need is a different kind of stimulus, a different kind of an experience that works authentically for them. Slowing down without the right support can end up feeling boring, frustrating, or even shame-inducing if it doesn't lead to arousal. That's because there's two types of arousal. There's spontaneous arousal, and then there's responsive arousal. Both of them are completely normal, but most people, even healthcare providers, prioritize spontaneous arousal as the norm. But that is totally not true. Spontaneous arousal is when somebody just is spontaneously able to access their arousal. They're able to anticipate pleasure. They're able to anticipate enjoyment in a sexual experience, or from their fantasies, or seeing a partner, or seeing something that feels just sexually arousing. So that's spontaneous arousal. When it comes to responsive arousal, that is the experience where somebody needs enough stimulation in the right ways and understands what's happening for their bodies in order for their sexual system to get the message that sex is going to feel good, that sex is safe. So responsive arousal is more about the experience of pleasure rather than the anticipation of pleasure. And that can be really hard for people to understand the distinction between what is normal if we've been prioritizing that spontaneous arousal is the way that it should be. And a lot of times people actually experience spontaneous arousal, both partners can actually experience spontaneous arousal early on in the relationship. And then as time goes on, usually after that honeymoon phase, a year and a half, that's when spontaneous arousal stops being as accessible. And that's because we're not taught what happens to our arousal systems as we become more and more familiar with another person. So it's not that you just stop becoming attracted to your partner. It's not that your arousal system is just not accessible anymore. It means that your relationship has evolved into something new, into something different. But nobody has ever taught you how to work with the new kind of arousal system that you might be experiencing. And it's also totally normal that your sexual arousal system might be responsive after a period of time in your relationship, and your partners might still be spontaneous. That is absolutely normal. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you or your relationship. So without knowing this, and without knowing your specific arousal language, it can create a shame spiral. And intimacy exercises like slowing down or trying to go on dates can actually make somebody feel worse because they go into a shame spiral of expecting that something should work and then going into more performance. And then that ends up causing a disconnection, causing so many more challenges. So we want to move away from expecting performance from the sexual arousal system and instead move into curiosity and connection. So the key thing to know about sexual arousal systems is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. And this is the biggest myth out there, that people think that enough sexual stimulation should be able to create enough sexual arousal that sex can feel good and pleasurable. When you throw pain into the mix, that's going to get even more complicated, because in the past, if you've experienced any kind of pain, if you have vaginismus, not only are you going to have a challenge around expecting your system to have spontaneous arousal, but also there is a big piece brought into your sexual arousal system that has said pain and sex and anything that looks like it is actually dangerous. And so you're fighting against not only social norms that are telling you your body should be doing something different, but you're also dealing with a pain response, which has created a survival response in your system about sex. So it's a lot to have to untangle. If you've moved through any kind of vaginismus treatment or pelvic pain treatment and you're finding that arousal still feels challenging, it's probably because your nervous system is still trying to unpair that pain response with arousal. So that's why I created the arousal architecture. It was something that I developed after hearing from thousands of hours of listening to clients talk about their challenges with arousal, especially clients who've had pain during penetration. Hearing from them that they don't know what arouses them anymore, that they are trying things that the books tell them, they're trying things that maybe their couples therapist told them, they're trying things that they read in a blog, do this exercise, it'll help you access your arousal system, but they're finding that it's not working for them because the typical things, the sexually explicit things that we all would imagine or think that we should be turned on by, it's not working because your system probably needs something different, something more nuanced, and something that doesn't come with shame of thinking, wow, I need to have this in order to get aroused. Instead, it should be celebrated. Cool, I really understand now what my arousal system is and my arousal language and the things that are going to actually work for me, not trying to fit into a box of what everybody else thinks that it should be. So you need something that's going to support your unique turn-ons. That could be sensory preferences, that could be emotional patterns, that could be energetic connection, and so much more beyond explicitly sexual things. One couple told me that they had been endlessly prescribed to just go on more date nights, and they still felt bad, and it made things feel so much worse, and they felt like it was their fault, and that maybe they weren't attracted to each other anymore. I told them that wasn't the case. I helped them understand that they needed to have space for their unique arousal styles and stop blaming themselves for what's happening and actually find and focus on the things that feel good for them authentically. So if this is starting to make sense to you and you've realized that maybe what you've tried hasn't been tailored to your specific nervous system and your arousal needs, I created a 5-day journey for people who are wanting to explore and understand the top 5 things that you could possibly try in order for your nervous system to start to rewire from the impact of having any kind of painful sex or unpleasant experiences into feeling a little bit more embodied and in control of your system. If that sounds interesting to you, you can check it out at kanakassar.com/break-free. It's called Break Free from Pelvic Pain, or you can get the link below. The goal in overcoming vaginismus and having better sex, more fulfilling connection, isn't about just trying different sexual things and hoping something works. It's about understanding that your system needs a different model for looking at your arousal system, which is why the arousal architecture exists. It can help you learn more about the 5 different arousal activator dimensions. And even if you've had difficulty with arousal in the past, the arousal architecture doesn't have to be about explicitly sexual things or anything that is intentionally leading to arousal. You can start at ground zero with looking at just what non-sexual things bring you a sense of peace, joy, calm, resiliency, pleasure, non-sexual pleasure. Starting there is a great place because when you start to get exposure to understanding those 5 different dimensions and how they show up in your daily life, and you can start to weave that into your body and start to imprint the sense of nervous system regulation, that is going to help wire the pathway to pleasure and arousal so much more easily. So even if you're not ready to start to look at the arousal aspect of it, you can start to look at what is just going to create resiliency and resource in your nervous system. Also, I love this framework because it helps take the guesswork out of understanding the language behind the things that you need. Partners have told me that they really appreciated being able to have these things broken down into the 5 dimensions, and then within each dimension, understanding what things create a sense of fulfillment in that particular dimension. It can create a language that helps people communicate about, oh, I'm needing more in this dimension than in this dimension, because we're really just focusing on the sexual dimension, the sexual stimulation dimension. I need a lot more in the headspace dimension, or I need a lot more in the energetic connection dimension. So being able to understand that you might have different levels than your partner does, and that you might have different things within your dimensions, it'll give you a new way to start discussing these things so that you don't have to try and figure out how to put the words together. I've made it so much easier for couples to do this. The other really crucial thing about the arousal architecture is that we are trying to to redefine the priorities in sexual experiences with partners. So most of the time, what sex is everything in the sexual stimulation dimension. So sex to most people is kissing, touching, being naked around each other, oral sex, manual sex. And what typically happens for people is that they do behaviors only in that dimension. The problem with that is that most times that's prioritizing typically one person's preferences or priorities or pleasure priorities. When people start to take the arousal architecture and put it to use, they realize that maybe there are some other dimensions that are needing some more attention. And so what they'll do is they'll start to have these conversations with partners that are a lot more effective at talking about, let's balance this out a little bit more. Let's prioritize some of these other things that work really well for me. They might not be your favorite, but these are my favorite, and I really want to do more of these. So instead of things being mostly sexual stimulation focused, there are other things like emotional connection and headspace and embodiment and erotics that can balance out a lot more easily so that everybody's pleasure priority is given just as much effort and focus than it being balanced. And being able to do these things is what is going to help open up the door to connection and make it so much easier to access arousal and pleasure. And then of course the confidence is just gonna skyrocket because you're feeling like you understand your own unique arousal needs. You're able to communicate about it better, and you've got a system to be able to figure out how to balance and prioritize both people's interests and not just expecting that everybody should look like one person's. In the next video, I will walk you through the exact framework that I take all of my clients through that helps them overcome vaginismus and finally have a sex life that actually feels like theirs. So if you're ready for something different, something deeper, click to watch and I'll see you there.